Hi everyone, welcome back to Inside Archaeology. As you will have noticed from the title of this video and hints I've been dropping on my live streams, I recently spent 18 days on a Fred Olsen cruise traveling from Cape Town to Southampton giving talks on archaeology. It was a really interesting experience and honestly not one that I'd ever considered as something you could do with an archaeology degree or work background, so I wanted to make a video about it to share the whole experience with you all. Within this video, I'm going to cover how I got the gig, a brief summary of the trip itself, what I liked, what I didn't like, and then whether I would recommend or do this again. Before we begin, don't forget to take a few seconds to subscribe or like to help support me in keeping the channel going and show the algorithm that people are interested in real archaeology. If you want to take it further and actively support real archaeologists in our efforts to push back against sensationalism and conspiracy theories, all super thanks or Ko-fi donations go back into improving and promoting the channel. All right, everyone, let's dig in. Often when people think of archaeology as a job, they imagine it involves lots of travel around the world looking for treasure and are then sorely disappointed to find out it's really not like that at all. You might be traveling a bit, but you're not going to be traveling around the entire world. It'll probably end up just being to a more local place where your research is focused. Certainly, I think the travel aspect is one of the most common reasons I see people quoting as to why they want to become an archaeologist. And now I can say that speaking on cruise ships is a way to scratch that itch. As long as you're okay with the not finding treasure bit, there is not nearly enough time in port for that. Speaking on cruise ships was never something that was pitched or proposed to me during my time at school studying archaeology or as a career path. And to be fair, it's not something that I would consider to be a doable full-time job. It's more of a side hustle. And it tends to be something that quite a few retired professors or archaeologists do as a way to travel the world on the cheap when they're not having to worry about taking time off of work for holiday. How this opportunity came across my desk is quite simple. For a while now, I've been signed to Past Preservers, an entertainment agent who provides experts to TV shows and films, movies, and more. And in spring/summer 2023, they announced that they had been approached by Fred Olsen Cruise Lines to provide expert speakers providing talks on the boats, which are called enrichment, that are tailored to the specific cruise itinerary. In exchange for talks, the expert and a companion receive the cruise and a small stipend for spending on board. The only upfront cost is that of the airfare of your companion, which is subsidized, so it's much cheaper than it ordinarily would be. That sounded like a pretty good deal to me, so I went ahead and pitched talks for a 13-night listed cruise going from Dubai to Cyprus in March and April 2024. I was accepted pretty quickly on the basis of giving 5 talks over the duration of the trip. And these are mostly done on sea days in between ports, as I said, entertainment or enrichment, things for the guests to do. One of the reasons I was particularly keen and asked to go on this cruise was that one of the stops was at Aqaba in Jordan and had an excursion out to Petra, which I have visited multiple times about 10 years ago, but I was really wanted to be able to bring my husband there to just kind of share that place with him. However, in February, we were informed that due to the ongoing situation happening in the Red Sea, in the interest of safety, the cruise had changed its itinerary so that instead of going through the Suez Canal and the Mediterranean to get back to Southampton, they were now going to divert around Africa, which is like the biggest reroute of all time. Which, to be fair, is a totally understandable and I think the right choice to make in terms of guest and everyone's safety. I was given the option to cancel or continue on the new schedule, which would extend our planned trip from around 14 to 13 days to 18 days. My husband and I decided to go since it was a much more cost-effective holiday than we would have been able to have anywhere else. And we had been planning on going on it for like almost a year. I offered to do an additional talk and changed a few of my topics to make them more generic and less focused on the ports that we had originally been intending on visiting. This was the first cruise I'd been on since I was a teenager and my husband's first ever. We left at the end of March, flying all the way from Edinburgh to join the ship at Cape Town via Heathrow and Doha. Our cabin was outward facing with a window onto the promenade deck and was honestly much better than I was expecting. I thought that they were going to put us in like an interior room. The bathroom in particular was much nicer than I remembered from cruise ships bathrooms and when I went about like 20 years ago. And in particular, I have to mention the shower, which got quite nice and hot and had great water pressure. The beds were also really comfortable as well. We were really lucky that another speaker was also coming on board at the same time as us. His name was Lieutenant Colonel Dick Taylor, and he was going with his wife. And because we had a bunch of time to sit on the dock and travel together from the airport to the port, we got to know each other a bit and ended up making great friends with him and his wife, which was really beneficial in giving us some people to talk to on board besides ourselves. He has done quite a few of these cruises before and was also so helpful in giving me tips and tricks for how to kind of navigate things. Over the course of the cruise, the talks that I gave were a walk through Petra, which was a photo walk through the major sites of the archaeological park, mostly using my own photos. And through that, then providing insight into the development of the city, its abandonment, and its recent history as a Bedouin village, as well as personal recommendations of how to get the most out of a visit there. I still did this talk even though we weren't visiting Petra because I thought the information would still be useful for anyone who might want to go there in future. I followed this with a talk on the Nabateans and their nomad empire because they were the people that built and inhabited Petra. As a desert people, their mastery of water management, stone carving, and agriculture, combined with their vast trade network, led to their emergence as a powerful and distinct political entity in the 1st century BCE. They have been depicted as fiercely independent by contemporary Greco-Roman accounts, which talk about the rise and fall of what have been described as one of the most gifted peoples of the ancient world. Next was Crusader Queens, which covered the dramatic stories of Queen Melisende and her granddaughter, Queen Sibylla. One is regarded as one of the most successful rulers of her time, and the other is partially blamed for the loss of Jerusalem to Saladin. My 4th talk drew heavily on my Pharaoh live streams that I've done on this channel and discusses the great site of Giza, focusing on everything that we've found there. So I wanted to talk about what else the world's most excavated archaeological site contains, and also what's left to find there. My penultimate talk was called A Day on Site at Khirbet al-Mudanya, and was a look behind the scenes of an archaeological dig featuring the Iron Age Tell in Jordan, where I excavated for 3 years during my studies. I finished everything off with the Archaeology of Indiana Jones, an overview of archaeological sites and artifacts that inspired the stories of the epic film series. This was a very much condensed version of the videos I did on this topic last summer, which are all in a playlist that you can find here. Each of my talks was 45 minutes long and delivered in the big Neptune Lounge Theater. It has seating for, I'm going to guess, like 200 to 300 people. And for each one, I got a Britney Spears headset mic, which I really enjoyed using because I was able to talk with my hands. I actually do that a lot. You guys miss out on a lot of it because I only tend to film from a certain amount up, but yeah, I'm a hand talker. I will say that I was quite nervous at the beginning because it's very different experience speaking to an audience of people instead of to a camera, but eventually I settled into it and got into kind of the groove of things. There were lots of options of different things to do on board every day if you so wished, but we were there mostly to try and relax. So the one activity we routinely did every day was a pub quiz. We teamed up with the other lecturer, Dick, and his wife, and actually did pretty well, even though as guest entertainers, we weren't officially allowed to win. My talks were all on these archaeological related subjects, and they had a pretty good turnout. Dick's talks were a bit more culturally generalist. He gave one on flags, the history of alcohol, the battle for the Atlantic in World War II, food rationing, and British culture in the 60s, 70s, and I think 80s. He's written quite a few different books on his expertise, which is military history. So I'm going to put a link to where you can find them in the description as well, if that's something that you're interested in learning about. I found him to be a really good, engaging speaker. There were 2 other speakers on board as well, and we went to quite a few of their talks. Laura used to be a teacher and gave talks on cultural and historical topics more relevant to our itinerary than mine, and her partner Richard is a wildlife expert and photographer. He gave talks on phone photography, and I learned so much about using my phone camera from it, as well as on the wildlife that we could expect to see on our route. And he also spent most of his time not speaking outside with his big, long lens and fancy camera getting photos of said wildlife. He got some great shots of flamingos, dolphins, and flying fish, which you can view on his website. You can also see it on his Facebook page. It's Richard Lovelock. I'll put that in the description as well, especially if wildlife photography is your thing. He's got some really beautiful photos. Our port stopovers after we left Cape Town were Walvis Bay in Namibia, São Vicente in Cape Verde, and Santa Cruz in Tenerife. We didn't get to see much of Namibia because we were too late when we got on the cruise to sign up for excursions, but we did go on 2 tours in the other ports. In Cape Verde, we went to the town and beach on our own, which was like beach in particularly was like beautifully scenic, very white, like turquoise blue ocean. It was gorgeous. And then later in the afternoon, we went on a bicycle tour of local community centers in the poorer part of town, learning about local life. We also visited a local market, and then the tour ended up in the hills with some homemade food and demonstrations of local dances, which were very, very impressive. I'd say that this was the activity that we enjoyed the most. We got to see the real São Vicente and the life of the real people that live on this island rather than just like the polished version that tourists usually see. And the sunset in particular was lovely, and everyone that we met was just so friendly. In Tenerife, we went on a bus tour to the pyramids of Guimar, which are 6 rectangular, terraced, pyramid-shaped structures built from lava stone without the use of mortar. They were popularized, or you may have heard of them back in the 90s, because a guy by the name of Thor Heyerdahl thought that they were proof that ancient peoples had traversed the Atlantic. The fact that they were these pyramids here meant that they'd taken them from Egypt and then gone to Mesoamerica. However, it has been found that the structures date to roughly the 19th century CE via archaeological work. And I am planning to do a more in-depth video on this topic since I now have a bunch of photos and video from there. So watch out for that. The weather was pretty good throughout the trip with very little rain, and right around the equator it got nice and hot, which is like my perfect temperature. I was very, very much looking forward to wearing shorts. The boat itself is on the smaller size for cruise ships and has space for around 1,300 guests and 551 crew. And I think that there were only between 700 to 900 guests on board, so it wasn't at full capacity. There were 5 main options for food. There's the buffet restaurant, which was open every day and didn't really have a dress code. There was also the poolside cafe or restaurant, the formal dining room, which you had to dress up for, and 2 specialty restaurants called Vasco and Colors and Tastes. We mostly ate at the buffet and the pool. We went to Colors and Taste once for a really nice dinner towards the end of the trip, which I'm not going to lie, it was very tasty. I kind of wish we had gone there more now, but you have to pay an extra supplement to eat there. And we were honestly trying to save money, so we only went there once. The part of the boat that we spent the most time on was the Bookmark Cafe. There was a well-stocked library here, puzzle tables, lots of board game options, comfy seats, and you had staff that would bring you over coffees and cakes for snacks whenever you wanted. My husband had so many lattes. Now I'm going to talk about what I did and didn't like about the trip. To start off positive, I have to say that both the staff and the guests and everyone that we met was incredibly kind and nice. It was very much the opposite of a lot of the kind of like British, not stoicism, but like keeping to yourself-ism that I tend to encounter in the UK. Being on board really reminded me more of Canada. You had like lots of people coming up and speaking to you, and people were just so nice. And maybe a little bit of that was because I was a quote unquote celebrity on board. You know, my talks were all recorded and people could actually watch them later in their cabins if they didn't come to the actual talk themselves. So they kind of knew who I was. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. One comment in particular that I received a few times that I enjoyed was that people would tell me that they weren't sure or they didn't want to come to my talk on Petra because they thought that it would just kind of like rub in their faces the fact that we weren't going there. But then they would follow that up by saying that actually after watching it, they're really glad that they did go because it made them realize that seeing it as a part of a cruise where you tend to have like quite a limited amount of time to go and see these things made them think that, oh, I actually need to do an entire trip all by itself just to see Petra in order to have the full experience. The food on board was also generally much better than I remembered. I have to give a special shout out to the fact that they had cinnamon buns available at breakfast every day. And also crispy, streaky bacon. Those are two of my favorite breakfast foods, and they are very hard to find in the UK. You can buy crispy bacon in the grocery store, but it's just not something you tend to see at restaurants. I was also very pleasantly surprised by how good the internet was on board. You do have to pay each day to access it, and it's not cheap. There's also no video streaming or call capability, but that actually worked out fine, and it was actually kind of nice to go so long without watching TV. We just, read a lot of books, and I had brought a Steam Deck, so I was playing my video games, and I was more than happy with that lack of TV and whatever. You could watch movies. They did have movies available like on the TV in your room that were free of charge, but we thought about watching movies a few times, but we usually just ended up having a nap. Most of what I didn't enjoy about the experience actually has nothing to do with the cruise itself or is something that like Fred Olsen could have fixed or really done anything about. Firstly is the fact that for the entire trip, our bags got left behind by Qatar Airways. Let's be honest, that's a really crappy way to start a holiday. It meant that we weren't able to explore and enjoy Cape Town at all because we were too busy that first day shopping for clothes and toiletries. And I then went on to spend not a few hours trying to rearrange for our bags to catch up to us, but the airline eventually gave up and said that it was too complicated. We'll just send them to you back when you're home. This had a bit of a direct impact on our holiday. Like I said, we spent quite a bit of time shopping that we otherwise would have spent trying to enjoy the places we were visiting. And also meant that part of the reason we didn't go to like the formal dining room and the other more fancy restaurants was because you're expected to dress up a bit for that. And we just didn't have a lot of clothes to be able to do that. I bought one dress and my husband bought like a shirt and some nice trousers, but that was it. We arrived back from our holiday and 2 days later, our bags got back from where they had just been sitting in Cape Town. And I will take this opportunity to say that I am still chasing the airline to reimburse me for the money that I spent on my credit card to buy all of the stuff that I needed. And I could honestly rant for a really long time about how awful their customer service is. They have effectively removed any single person that you can speak to like over the phone. Like you cannot do that. You have to go through their live chat unless you want to buy a ticket from them. Okay. I need to stop. Let's move on. I will say though that it's a huge credit to all the ship guests that after I mentioned this whole like bag saga as the reason why I was presenting to them in shorts and a t-shirt, I had so many people come up and offer me clothes. It was really touching. I actually got this like dress that I'm wearing from one of the guests on board who is a professor who used to teach at York and is going to go speak on another cruise in a little while. And it fits me great. And I'm so grateful for it. The next thing that was a negative part of the experience for me was the seasickness. Now, I've never been motion or seasick in my life. My parents used to have a small boat on Lake Erie in Canada that I've been on many times, but I didn't manage to escape it on this voyage. My husband was perfectly fine, annoyingly. I didn't get it right away, to be fair, just about halfway through. I think what ended up happening was that the direction of the swell changed, and because of where our cabin was on the ship, it meant that we were just kind of in the perfect spot to really feel the motion of the ocean, so to speak. It also didn't help that occasionally a wave would like bang the hull so hard in the middle of the night that it would wake you up, so you're not sleeping particularly well either. On the morning of my talk about Giza, I woke up not feeling so great after a night where the ship was pitching a lot, which is where it kind of, you go up and then you go down instead of just rolling side to side, which, yeah, it's very roller coaster-y. I got to my talk, I got mic'd up, and then about 5 minutes before I was due to start, I ran to the bathroom and threw up. At that point, I thought, it's going to be similar to one of those things where like, you throw up and you feel a lot better. So I thought, okay, well, I'm going to persevere and try and give my talk. And then after that, I can go feel horrible for the rest of the day. And I did kind of perk up afterwards. So rinsed my mouth out, took some breath mints and went on stage. But it turned out that was wrong. About halfway through my talk, I basically had to say, sorry, everyone, I'm really not feeling well. I'm gonna have to go now, and I will try to finish this talk later. Ripped off my headset and then ran to the toilet again. Yeah, it's not my finest moment. I then spent the rest of the day hiding in the back of the boat where it was moving a lot less. And I wasn't able to take seasickness medication either at this point to make things easier. I just had to suffer through. It was really rough. Once again, I had so many people come up and ask how I was feeling, or ask my husband how I was feeling, offer me medication or like home remedies for seasickness. It was very, very generous. One person even sent me seasickness like wristbands to my room. I was very grateful for all of that. Luckily, that one day was the worst, but I spent pretty much the rest of the trip feeling pretty queasy. So it's kind of hard to enjoy things when you feel like that. The last kind of thing that we didn't like or that we would change that my husband and I have both agreed on is that if we do a cruise again, it would be for a much shorter amount of time with more ports and stops. Now, I will say that how this particular cruise turned out is not something that Fred Olsen had a lot of control over. They needed to get the boat back to Southampton in time for its next voyage, which would have been leaving the same day that we arrived. And they were also competing with every other cruise line who had to do the same reroute for a spot or space at the ports. So I don't think they had nearly as much flexibility as they might have normally. However, this meant that we spent 14 of 18 days at sea. At one point, we had a 7-day stretch. And for us in particular, especially as first-time cruisers or people that haven't done it a lot, this was just too much time at sea. I will say that that's not normal. It's just circumstantial. Our time at the ports was also quite short. That wasn't something that I particularly remembered from my previous cruises when I was younger. In Tenerife, we only had around like 6 hours. And especially for somebody who was seasick, by the end, I was really ready to be back on land. Would I do it again? My answer is tentatively yes. I wouldn't do that exact itinerary, but that, to be fair, as I said, that wasn't what I originally signed up to do, and we were just kind of trying it out for the first time. I don't mean to sound ungrateful in any way or make it seem like we didn't have a good time. Like I said, I did lots of napping, lots of reading, and I met lots of nice people. And I mean, someone made my bed every day, like twice a day, cleaned my room twice a day, made all my food and did all the dishes. It was a very nice break from all of that. And it was a good learning experience to kind of reacquaint myself with cruises and what to expect if I were to do one again. I'll also say that in total, besides the airfare that we paid in advance of the cruise and the souvenirs that we bought while we were in ports, because of the stipend that I received, we only ended up spending £2 total, like on our onboard account for the entire trip. And that wasn't us trying not to spend money. We bought many, many lattes and some soft drinks and other drinks. I got a spa treatment. We went on an excursion and lots of other extras. So I would say that for an 18-day holiday, that's a pretty good deal. All right, everyone, time to pack up our finds and hang up our shovels for today. That's everything for this video. What did you think? Have you been on a cruise? Would you like to? Where would you visit if you had the choice? Don't forget to comment, like the video, or subscribe to the channel before you leave. If you're feeling extra generous, you can give me a super thanks or go to my Ko-fi page and support me with a small donation. Taking a few seconds to do this in any way, big or small, you can help the channel grow so that I can continue to provide quality heritage content for free that you can trust is well-sourced, researched, and presented by someone who is an expert in this subject. Thank you so much for watching. Stay curious, and I hope to see you on my next adventure into the world of archaeology.